Today we're sitting down with Dave Vobora. He's the CEO of the Adaptive Training Foundation based out of Dallas, Texas. He and his wife Sarah came all the way up here to Idaho to sit down and talk to us about trauma, recovery, and the equity of sweat amongst veterans and adaptive athletes. Sit down and enjoy. Welcome to the Mission43 Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the struggles and triumphs of transitioning to life after the military. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm a former Army Special Forces officer who's personally experienced the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. In every episode, we'll be sharing tips, strategies, and real-life stories of veterans and their families who've chosen Idaho for their life after the military. So join us, and let's start the conversation. Dave Vobora, thanks for being here, man.
Dan, we're in Idaho, man.
I know.
Your dojo.
Your native land.
I love it here, man.
Well, not exactly your native land. You grew up in Eugene, so that explains the hippie part of you and whatnot and what have you.
Yep.
But you did go to IDAHO,
Go
Idaho,
Vandals.
Idaho. Go. Yeah, and then, brief stint in the NFL, no big deal. Linebacker with the Rams and Seahawks and whatnot. And then how did your career end?
It was a shoulder injury. I was covering a punt. We were playing the Redskins, and yes, I did say Redskins.
Oh, goodness.
Sorry, these were before the Commander days.
That's okay.
So we're going to stay true to it. But I was covering a punt, got shoved in the back, running full speed. When you land on your elbow, the shoulder didn't like that, man. It just blew up. That when you get injured, you hear the internal pop and the sound of that.
Oh, yes.
And they took me to the medical tent, and they cut your jersey off. They shove a big old needle down in there and pump it, and they said, lift your arm. I went. And they went, all right, go to the locker room.
Yeah.
I was the last play in the NFL.
Man. So what happened after that?
After that, it was a series of me trying to avoid the question, which was, who's David without the game of football?
Right, because that was your identity.
Being Mr. Irrelevant, last pick taken to become a starter rookie year. And again, I say this humbly because I did more than some but less than most in the nature of the game. But I had to have tunnel vision to have success. It was like the blinders, because we call them the Grim Reapers, but you never know when the front office guy's waiting at the door who he's going to grab, and that's it.
Bring your playbook.
That's it. So, it was an identity crisis leaving the game, or at least what led me to just coping by taking the pain pills that they prescribed me and realizing, like, these work, to not think about what scares me, which was I don't know what the hell I'm going to do after this.
It numbs all kinds of pain, doesn't it?
It does. It's crazy because, I graduated with a double degree from Idaho with, a 3.4 or something like that.
Damn,
I was a good
big brain,
student.
Dave.
Had a good degree, good student, and none of that felt like it was anything to cling to for the future.
Right.
And it was like, where do my gifts match anything to do something at this level of work?
Yeah.
When you're running down on kickoff and the cathedral blows up when you make that play, there's nothing that could replicate that. So if you go to chase it, it's a dark hole you're going to find yourself in. And that's where I was.
I think a lot of veterans can relate to that. I know I can relate to that, certainly, where you feel like, it's not exactly, never played in a Super Bowl, never been in the NFL, but, you do get that feeling. It's an ego rush, honestly. It's an adrenaline rush.
God complex.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys
control everything.
The true battlefield is what you experienced. And I couldn't imagine, the adrenaline of stepping outside the wire with your boys, knowing that, you're the top tier operators in the world and you're going to go hook and jab with bad guys and make sure that you're going to rectify evil. That to me is, I couldn't imagine or fathom. And yet a little dose of it is playing in the NFL.
I'd say it's a pretty good dose. So
better paychecks, maybe.
Yeah, certainly a little bit.
Less MREs too.
Yeah, that's true. But so you turn to basically drugs, right?
Yeah. Well, what started with those prescriptions, when you have enough income, it's easy to just suddenly start to buy those oxys off the street. And I was taking an abundance of narcotics, from, opiate pain medication to Xanax and other things, just to numb out. And I remember taking so much sleeping meds that I didn't want to wake up. Yeah. And, I don't know if I've said that specifically on camera, but it was clear that I needed a massive intervention. And we were season had ended. I was getting ready to have a second shoulder surgery. And I looked at my wife. We were on a plane to Hawaii. She was my girlfriend at the time. And I looked at her and I said, right as we took off, because I knew she was held hostage. She was captive at this point. And I said, when we get back, you're not taking me home. I want you to take me straight to a hospital. I'm addicted to blah, 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 blah. And she just she'd never done a drug in her life.
Yeah.
And, that trip to Hawaii, I barely remember anything.
Yeah.
I thought I brought enough. Of course, as an addict, you forget you took or you double take. And then I was going through withdrawal, couldn't find anything on the island in Maui. And I had climbed up. We were on the 20th floor of the balcony of our room, and with a bad shoulder, I'm hanging. And my girlfriend's, Sarah's just yelling, please no, please no, please no, trying to grab my feet. I don't remember any of it. Nothing. We landed back in Seattle, and I'm fully going through the withdrawals and sweating and tremors, and the hospital wouldn't take me, so we had to go to my dealer's house, and I took her to, guns, drugs, things like, I would have never brought anyone I cared about into. So it just shows you, right, like the ability to not open your mouth early on. You think you got it, or you think like, oh no, man, I'm going to figure out my way out of this. You can't think your way out of it.
You're a high functioning dude. You're a high performer. No. You're a chronic overachiever, right? That's what got you to being Mr. Irrelevant to a starter in your first year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pride, right? Like you always figure shit out, and all of a sudden you get to a point in your life where you're not in charge anymore.
Yeah, the rule book had changed.
Yeah,
everything. It was that like your greatest attributes work against you, right? The toughness, the pain tolerance, the ability to be on the field at all cost. But then that all cost was just really the slow suicide.
Yeah,
like I was just killing myself because again, my worth, value, and motivation was extrinsic. I was known for what I did, and the applause of others in that arena is where I found my identity.
Yeah,
and so moving to discover, all right. And that detox was a critical point for me. Lost 34 pounds in 7 days.
Oh, shit.
Had seizures, couldn't control either end. At one point, I tried to grab a plate of food to feed myself anything. It's like day 3. And I couldn't pick it up. I fell. I shattered the plate, and the nurses rushed in. And I was ashamed, embarrassed, and I was trying to scrape up the plates of the food, and they restrained me, these 2 little nurses. I couldn't even fend them off because they thought I was going to use that broken plate to try to cut my wrists. It was like this bottom of like, holy shit.
As you're sitting in your own feces and vomit.
Talk about a low. It was just like, I just remember like my soul at a level being wrung out and feeling like, man, if I could just find a way to repurpose what I'm going through, and I didn't know it at the time, right? Like I think of so many of the people that I've been able to help or connect with on that plane.
Yeah.
So now today I say it not in spite of that I went through, that I've gotten through that and achieved other things, but it's because of that. It's actually the qualifying factor, which is a perspective that I'm grateful for today. That makes me realize again, like those scars that I've been dealt are proof that I'm qualified to help somebody going through a tough time.
Right. Well, that's interesting because like rehab, detox, all that shit, like you got clean, but what about your mental part? Like what happened after that actually made you stay off of that shit?
Well, I think the first component is finding a place where you can serve somebody else.
Yeah.
I remember it was just after the plate incident in detox. It was probably the following night. A male nurse came in, and there was like, and I say night, I didn't know if it was day or night. Yeah. I was so upside down because the guy opens my window and like this light comes in, and he's like, "You ready to get up and go talk to some people and encourage them?" And me in the ego state that I'm in, I'm like, what if they recognize me?
Yeah.
Right. I was suffering from this diagnosis. It's an ego-based syndrome called terminal look good.
Yep.
And again, like these people are heroin addicts and coke addicts and alcoholics and people that they're in their own pit of misery. They could care less who I am. And it wasn't for a few hours. I had to sit in there with this challenge, which I'm very aware that if something bothers me and I feel like it's for me, like you've planted a seed, and I'm going to go take ground on it. So I got up and I started to just meet people and talk with people and realize like, man, the beauty of humanity is that you can't take someone's pain from you or from them and take it on, but you can help them avoid the mindset of suffering around that pain.
Yeah.
And that's where I think my lesson and ultimately what I've done over the last decade now has been teed up for a little bit of empathy, but a lot of compassion.
Yeah.
And compassion's different. It interrupts you, and then you have an opportunity to take action to, maybe it's just to let that person speak and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Maybe it's to let them not say a word and they just fall apart, and you're just there to allow them to do that. And that's the grace that has come in through that experience.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, for me and doing the work at Mission43, you doing it at the Adaptive Training Foundation, and both inside and outside those organizations, right? Mm-hmm. There is this sense of, oftentimes it is a good feeling to help other people, right? All the time, especially if, you're the type of leader that you are, the personality traits that come with you inherently. But basically, it's easy to work on other people's problems and ignore your own.
Therein lies the escapism.
Yeah. By the way, you still have the chronic look good thing. But that's just because the lights on his side are way better than mine. So
this is the beautified filter.
If I shaved my chest, I'd look exactly like you. So
yeah, the escapism, the beautiful distraction.
Yeah.
That I think if you're in an ecosystem with people, they will see and hopefully help call you out. And I say call you out in a responsible way where it's like, hey, buddy, like there's that old Batman quote with Two-Face where he's like, you see yourself as the hero long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yep.
And I think that's why you need people to your right and to your left that have your best interest in mind. They're the people that they're not going to be nice. They're always going to be kind. Mm-hmm. And kindness oftentimes means saying the thing that you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was clear, and I'll never forget it. You know this story, but I was trying to manage my for-profit gym. At the same time, I had started meeting these injured warriors, these guys missing limbs that had served, first responders, spinal cord injuries, and then civilians from trauma from car accidents or neurological disease, you fill in the blank. And I had a balance between not wanting to charge any of these adaptive athletes, these people with physical disabilities, and then I'm managing my for-profit business, which is like training the Staubach family,
right,
and working with top tier athletes that are getting ready to go to the league or guys that are in the league. And I would stay at the gym sometimes on yoga mats, not come home. And this time I got 2 young kids at the time.
Yep.
And I came home one night, it was probably 2 a.m., table like this, our dining room table, one light hanging over like interrogation style. I saw my wife sitting there, thought about faking my death, going to Mexico.
Yeah, exactly.
And went, all right. And I sat down and she looked at me and said, do I have to be missing an arm or a leg for you to put the same type of focus and attention on us and your family?
What'd you say?
I said nothing, which was the right answer.
Yeah.
And I nodded. And the next words that she said is, there's no mission without a margin. I need you to choose. Where, like, again, is it the for-profit side? Is this because this is killing you and it's killing us? And that was the last. I closed the for-profit. Went all in on a nonprofit. Like, let's start a nonprofit. That seems easy.
Right. What do you know about nonprofits?
Yeah, exactly. So, but at the same time, I was all in. And early on, people were like, make it just vets. And it was, and it still is, 2/3 majority veterans and first responders. Yet the civilian coming in was a very intentional move. Mm-hmm. Because, again, I think we can silo ourselves with sectors that we overly identify with. And that also, it can be beneficial in the beginning. But if you have too much consistency in thinking and not challenging of that thought and experience through experience, then you just kind of find this repeating the same stuff, right? Like what got you here can't get you there. So you need to continually evolve season after season with people that help to challenge and broaden your worldviews and experiences. If nothing else, it just reaffirms your own values. So the mission and margin piece for me was clear, and I wanted it to be about all people because life doesn't discriminate.
No.
Doesn't matter what your bank account says, your skin color, veteran or civilian. I believe blood, yes, we bleed the same color, but the sweat is different. Sweat unifies us. When you do something that galvanizes you through sweat, there's a respect factor. And that's what's really cool to watch is when, I said this to my wife after being an addict. I'd say, you just don't understand. You don't understand. Right? You don't know what I've been through. And then one day she looked at me and she said, do you want me to? Would you want me to? I was like, oh shit, no, man. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody.
Right.
And it's not dissimilar to a lot of the vets that are coming home like, you civilians don't understand. Like, yeah, we don't, man. But do you want me to go to, Sangin or go to this place and have to do it? No, you don't. And that's when all of a sudden it's like, oh man, maybe this nature that like life provides the curriculum, it will be difficult for all people. Then there's a unifier for us to go, I see you, and I'm here to help you foster what it means, even if today we can't make sense of any of it. And that equalizer is the sweat, and then hopefully you have a little bit of a perspective around what you're still capable of.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, everything could be upside down, but today you took control of your life to move your body and do something good for your body, and you did it with people that have your back.
You've done that like repeatedly. I went through one of your courses.
Yeah, you crushed one of our courses.
I wouldn't say it crushed me. You're like 2 days for about 2 weeks.
You're the bell cow, man. Hey, so we give one award out for these hypers, and it's badass, dude. It's a freaking cowbell with our logo on it, just because to me, he set the standard and continues to, obviously, from the front here at Mission 43.
No. Well, I appreciate it, and it's not the first time I've been called a cow, but it's the nicest time I've been called a cow, and it meant a lot to me. That experience really was, a significant experience in my life and my recovery, which is still ongoing, but it made a huge impact for me. And I think that sweat equity that you're talking about is real. Like, you have to forge the mental through the physical. Yeah. And you've done so many of those things. You've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with a visually impaired athlete. You've done ultramarathons. You're training for Leadville 100 right now. Yeah. You've done all kinds of crazy endurance shit after being, a football player.
Yeah, never ran more than a mile, more than catch that guy.
Yeah, right. 40-yard dash, man. That's what it is. But what is it for you that, like, gives you the most joy? Like, honestly, when it comes to the realm of, like, working out, sweat equity, moving your body.
My why is helping people close the gap between who they think they are and who they're called to be. And what that looks like is taking one of our athletes on their first ever summit of a peak and camping trip. Mm-hmm. And we had 60-mile-an-hour winds at the summit staying over. Wind is one of those things that just slaps you up.
Indeed.
And this gal who was born with spina bifida, and she, like, her family would always go on the hikes or whatever and say, no, you have to stay. They wouldn't allow her. And so, like, I get fired up when I can take people on experiences that changes their beliefs about themselves or others, then changes their behavior, which then shapes a new result and empowers them to then do that for other people, right? Like, here's the thing: you can go and volunteer at a soup kitchen. You can have volunteer stuff, and that can make you feel good. Those are little hits of oxytocin, right? Dopamine, like serotonin. I'm doing good for people, but it's when you use something that was either something that harmed you, right? Like, I'll straight up tell you mine. Mine, as a 10-year-old boy, there was an older neighbor boy who I wanted him to like me. I wanted to be initiated, right? I wanted to be respected.
Yep.
And I was sexually abused by that man. And dude, when I had so many questions, I felt so broken. I felt so confused. I felt so lost. Instead of approaching that with that information to anybody, I just stuffed it down, right? I suppressed it. I repressed it for almost 2 decades. I mean, probably 15 years. So deep that I forgot it happened. And then when I was going through rehab, the counselor asked, like, has any of this ever happened in your past? I was like, nope. Yeah. Well, that night dreams started to show up. Something, the lid had been lifted.
Yep.
And once I initially acknowledged it, I said it, and it was like, oh, that feels good. It's out. I'm done with that. Let's just move on with life.
Mm-hmm. Not that easy.
Not quite that easy. And what happened was I realized, man, like, I used football as the way to achieve, so nobody asked me what the hell was going on inside. I 100%, I mean, I'd say this confidently. I don't think I would have made it in football if it wasn't charged by that scar.
Absolutely.
And so now today I share that and ended up having to do a ton of deep work. I started having dreams for about 2 years that I would physically, with my hands, murder my own dad. And not that my dad had anything to do with this, right? But all I think I wanted and needed and yearned for was that Goodwill Hunting moment with him.
Yeah.
That it's not your fault. I love you.
Yeah.
And that wasn't coming, and that's not his fault either, right? He's 3 generations of Marines. No one said, I love you. I mean, so it was for me to approach healing with the understanding that this is how you break a cycle. And this is how, again, if I'm honest about a lot of the people that I serve, it's not just the trauma that led them into my gym.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the childhood stuff.
Absolutely.
Things that show up. So I say that to tell you that to me is the superpower. And if people are listening and you've had something like that or otherwise occur, maybe that's where you need to find an opportunity to serve and give back, because that's how you heal yourself within that opportunity to serve, right? It's like your gifts match somebody's needs, maybe not the talents and gifts you put on a resume.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all the horrific things you've been through.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's as simple as I love basket weaving, and I'm going to go basket weave some inner city kids that don't know this, and they can use this as an out from their day-to-day.
The conversations that happen at ATF or the Adaptive Training Foundation, your facility, like when I was down there, a very diverse crew. I mean, it wasn't that big. It was 12 of us.
Yep.
We had double amputees, single amputees, dudes like me that are, TBI, whatever.
Yep. Says the guy who's in a boot and I know has different back stuff and shoulder stuff. Yeah.
Whatever. But
you may have all your limbs, but you're pretty banged up.
Well, yeah. But that comes with all the emotional stuff too, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think, the conversations that were had there, they're spurred by that physical component. And then everyone tears down physically just a little bit, and then they start to open up emotionally, mentally a lot more. And, we were doing 2-a-day workouts, and no one left the gym. Mm-hmm. Everyone stayed and talked in that middle time, you know, having a conversation with a badass dude that lost his leg, happens to be a black dude, and he knew that I was a cop, and this is in 2020, right, during BLM and everything, right? So we had some, you know, amazing conversations, people opening up about their childhood, people opening up about their overseas trauma or the trauma of coming home and trying to transition to who the new you is, right? Because
it's the death of something.
Yeah.
Like I don't, and I'm not trying to cheapen when we've lost people, right? Because that is truly a loss that, again, their spirit has to live within us. But I do think that grieving process, right? There's you have to process, you have to get angry, sad, and everything in between. To then start to usher in this metamorphosis, this opportunity that could have only happened if. And being grateful for that, that's like, again, the launch pad. I always think about that. There's like catapult being pulled back. You said something that stuck out to me earlier, which is that, recovery is a work in progress. Yeah, man. Destination thinking is a trap. Like, there's great programs, right? You put on different camps, clinics, retreats, you know, get people connected to really powerful things. But those are also tools and habits that should shape the next step. And it's just bouncing from X to X on the map. It's never like, dude, if you think you've arrived, that's the slipperyest slope.
Yeah. It's all finite. No matter how long that course duration is or that program duration is, it's going to come to an end, and then what are you going to do next? And that's where a lot of people like me, I think, struggle, right? People that are transitioning from the military, like, what's next? And I mean, if that was easy, Mission 43 wouldn't exist, right? And if it was easy to adapt to, you know, a new life as a adaptive athlete, then ATF wouldn't exist. Challenge Athletes Foundation wouldn't exist. And there's so much freaking power in that. Like, there's so much power in people that have those type of trauma. And it's like disappointing to me in a lot of ways, because those people, if they're most powerful when it, like, after it's just happened and when they're starting to go through that shit, that's like their biggest window of opportunity to make enough impact on other people. But most of us aren't strong enough to do that. Most of us retreat to our dark place.
Or the support around them, which has good intentions, keeps them from transcending the what is to be that person that ushers in this new opportunity.
That's a good point.
It's like those closest to us are those that are trying, and it's out of their sweetness, man. It's out of their love for us. But it's those that are like the foxhole friends that like let you go through the dark night of the soul and allow you to process all that stuff, and are okay if that means that your relationship does this. Dude, that's growth, man. Like, you're not supposed to drop down. I just heard this the other day. So emotions, right, have frequencies within us, right? They're measurable frequencies scientifically. Well, the frequency that fear vibrates at is the exact same as courage. To the point earlier, why Mission 43 ATF, otherwise, like, without fear, courage couldn't exist. So therefore, bravery, which to me is action in the face of fear, courage and bravery. Like, it's like when fear shows up, like, how do you change your relationship with it? You know, like, as an operator, as somebody who, again, you know, would largely understand the gravity of life and death in any given moment, you know, like, how did you deal with fear? And then how do you deal with it now, the same or differently?
That's unfortunate, because I think a lot of those scars, I mean, I just call them scars, I guess, like, what worked for me there does not always, probably not the best thing here. Like, having my 5-year-old ask me in the car, like, why do you yell at us when we make mistakes so much? I'm like, the easy answer is, like, because I was in the military and that's how I did it. But there's a lot more behind that, right? Because anger is fully acceptable in the military, just in general, whether you're in combat or not.
Yeah, it's like, usable, man.
Absolutely. It's fully acceptable in football. It's fully acceptable in all these weird warrior cultures, for lack of a better term. But here, it doesn't serve me well. I'm not flying off the handle at people. It doesn't serve me well. I'm not saying that all veterans do that. It's not the stereotype. The stereotype is not necessarily real, but there is some truth to that. Like, when you end up, you know, being a hammer for your adult life, it's hard to become something other than that.
And when you catch yourself doing it, being okay not to judge yourself around it, because I think that the quickest thing we can do, especially in the landscape with our kids, is early and often own when the part of us we show up in that way that's very kind of compensatory and it's reactive. The quicker we can course correct, own the thing, explain the thing, get them to understand. It's just like anything. We spank our kids. Yeah. And that's how I was raised. And there's an explanation. Yep. Hey, this is you know exactly what's happening. Yep. Here's the reason why. And immediately followed with absolute unconditional love. Yeah. 100% a hug. Look them in their eyes. Tell them I love them, whether they're crying or not. Yeah. And I think that's where, as a society, not telling people to go around spanking folks, but we, with our words, aren't willing to speak that truth in a way that proves the love we have behind the words. I mean, I need to be around men like you, people like on my staff that you've been grateful to be able to be under, right? Because although, yes, I may be the CEO, they know 100% they can challenge me on any of the things that I've said are my non-negotiables, my above all else. Yeah. If they don't see me operating as that, my expectation is that they call me out on it. Yeah. Not everybody can find a landscape where that works. A lot of times people, they're weekend warriors. They want to do their recreational stuff and just kind of escape. But I think when you get into a place with trying hard things with people from different backgrounds, that's where you grow.
Absolutely. You experiment quite a bit. I don't say experiment, but like you believe in a lot of non-standard medical treatment for all kinds of conditions. Yeah. Like what for people listening, watching out there, like struggling, like really struggling with mental health in some way, shape, or form. And we see that a lot, right? And you hear all the numbers about the suicide rate of veterans in the veteran community, all these different things. Like what alternative treatment is what you truly believe in? Yeah.
I think fundamentals, and I'm going to use a spiritual lens for this. Whether you believe in the Bible, whether you believe that in God or a specific sector of faith is relevant in this example. In the Bible, the Spirit of the Lord came to people in certain times, and every single time it tended to their basic human needs: food, shelter, clothing, comfort. Right? Yeah. And so I think that first you have to earn people's trust. And so back to which treatment modality or which way to heal, there's a a la carte menu. And I think that, there's a synchronicity to when things are, shared with you, to include this podcast right here. So if you're listening, right now there's a huge popularity in psychedelic assisted therapies, to which I've done every single one of them, right? Some of them, like ayahuasca, more than a dozen times. Others that... and again, I don't believe that those are like, that's not God speaking to you, but I almost see it more as like a good psychologist or clinician. Again, in a car accident that involved 4 people, there's 4 perspectives, right? So anything that you've experienced, there's another broader perspective around it. If you can disassociate from the narrative or the story that makes it so personal to you and see it from that different perspective, you now have a choice. With that comes a responsibility to decide whether or not that thing or the way that you've been, if it's serving you or if it's the thing that's hindering you. Maybe you even find, like I just talked about with my, childhood sexual abuse, that there's a little bit of gratitude almost, because now I can align with people that I get to serve and do life with that I truly care about in a way that is so much more paramount. So I think, look, there is the basic human needs. So back to, are you eating well, right? Are you moving your physical body? It doesn't have to be soul-crushing workouts. It could be something as simple as yoga or breath work or otherwise. How you sleep, which is a chicken and egg thing. Absolutely. I realize that. Those are fundamentals to like what's in your control today to do and use. So breath work for me is a huge one. Yep. Moving my body is a huge one. Then you start to get into a little bit more nuance, like plant medicine, like hyperbaric chambers, the MERT, the transcranial e-resonance magnet stuff. I think that can be valid. I think that all of these very technological or, sort of talked about advancements in healing, they work, but you need to have endocrinology foundationally. So understanding your blood, understanding your hormones, understanding the system and how it's integrating and talking to each other. If that stuff is sound, I think that you'll sleep better. I think that then those modalities like hyperbarics, maybe plant medicine. I'm a big believer in NAD+. We've been talking about it a lot. A few months ago, I found NAD+. NAD is a naturally occurring dinucleotide in the body. It's responsible for cellular repair. Yep. And you can do IV-based, delivery of that and get a ton of it in the body and do a huge cellular repair. It has been used for withdrawal, patients with addicts and opiates and otherwise. But it, for me, was the quickest way. It just kind of took my daily anxiety away. It really gave me a clarity mentally that I hadn't had in years. And with that came this confidence to look at my life and take an autopsy on, is this helping me or not?
Yeah.
And so the alcohol was one of the things that the second I realized, like, man, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
And I haven't taken a drink since. Will I ever drink again? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But I know today, the way that I feel too good.
Yeah.
So, the internet's a fascinating thing when you start to look at healing stuff. Anything that is top of list is going to be, backed by dollars, and it's probably going to be something that's not worth a shit. The lower that you go, or the more that you talk with people, and just see what's worked for them.
Yeah.
If chugging hot sauce is the way that somebody did it, and that was good for them, maybe that's what you got to do.
That's actually what I endorse. It's amazing.
Hot sauce chugging.
Yeah. It's weird that you knew that.
It's like colonics, just a little spicier.
Indeed. Yeah. Good times. But I want to ask you, like, we're talking about your childhood trauma and just talking about with individuals, talking about your, experience through rehab and all that stuff. Like, those are really heavy subjects, and they carry a lot of baggage for everybody, like every normal person, I'd say. There's a lot of folks like me that, I live to try to help other people overcome their stuff, but I'm not brave enough to be fully transparent with all of my flaws and baggage. Where do you get that bravery?
I think my parents instilled in me. We used to pick up homeless people, disabled people on our way to church, and our old Plymouth Voyager cloth bench seats. Afterwards, people would have accidents, or they'd just stink, and we'd have to stop and clean them. And we were shampooing them one day, and I looked at my mom, and I said, essentially, I'm a 10-year-old boy, and I said, "This sucks. This sucks, Mom. Why do we do this?" And that's what she said. She said, "Compassion is never convenient; it always interrupts." And I think through their willingness to operate in that, to see real service, and they didn't care about any credit. They weren't doing it for, it's not even, it was not a formal organization or anything. They were just doing it because they felt the need. That plus having an emotional intelligence. I'm much more like my mom than my dad in that aspect. All the athleticism comes from dad. Mom, not an athletic bone in her body, but she's really taught me how to feel. And I think that is a superpower today.
I agree.
It's the ability to situationally to understand and to feel people, right? Because they may be seeing or acting in a way, and you may have a judgment or preconceived notion as to why they're doing that. But interested people are interesting. When you are curious about something and you ask somebody, like, tell me about your story, like, what makes you be the way or do the things that you do? Then you can start to ask really good questions next, and really good questions. And I think that, like, whether you believe Jesus was a physical being that walked this earth or not, like, he asked really good questions. You know, like, and this is a terrible comparison after talking about Jesus, but remember in 40-Year-Old Virgin when they're at the bookstore,
smooth transition,
and he's like, just asking her questions. And back questions.
Yep,
it freaking works.
Yeah,
it freaking works, man. If people would stop, the first thing out of people's mouth is usually what? Advice or a suggestion or this is how I did it.
Yep.
If you would just ask 3 more questions before you went there, they'd actually listen to your advice. Try this, man. Try this. Ask more questions. The last thing that I say to my kids before I drop them off every day at school, ask good questions. That's it. Like, I've never been the smartest person in the room. I've considered myself or made the assumption I'm the dumbest. But by asking good questions, I can quickly become more, more innovative, more, more purposeful for providing value. Yeah. Value, man. Value. It's not about I'm the busiest person. On this, like, are you providing value in the ways in your life that matter most to you? If you're doing that, then you're living with purpose. It may be purpose that changes, money now, and eventually it goes, why was that the focus?
Yeah. What is, like, do you have a capacity, like a limit on your compassion? Because, like, there's no reason why someone like you should be still hanging out and supporting me through all my stuff, let alone the hundreds of other people that you do that for on a daily basis.
I think that's the magic, though, is like, these are my friends. Like, I wasn't the NFL player that wanted to just put my name on it. I talk a lot about, like, there's great organizations that give jobs or houses or cars, and those are great. Imagine, like, doing 9 weeks with somebody when the entire thing, like boot camp, is poking and prodding and seeing how you show up under stress. Like, y'all, this is psychology on a level that's so immersive that it's crazy. So I do find limitations to my compassion when, and I've learned through this, like, early it was to solve the stuff for them.
Yeah.
No handouts, man. Hands up.
Yep.
Reach for, make them, and somebody will come and ask me something, and I'll typically give them 2 or 3 things to do. If they do that, by all means, that door stays open, right? If they're not going to do that, then I'm going to save myself now from the emotional sponging that people do. And there is some of that. Like, there's, and you realize that you empower your staff to do certain things, especially military. They're like, no, I need to talk to the head shed. Like, no matter what, it's like, go talk to this person. And they're like, no, I got to wait till Dave's accessible. And yet I'm honored in that. Yeah. Like, we can bitch and moan about responsibility, but, like, if you are truly a leader, man, then it's a privilege.
It is.
Like, that pressure is a privilege, and you should see it. Like, I get asked all the time. The amount of letters of recommendation that I get asked to write are awesome. And I for a while, I was bitching and moaning. God love my wife. There she is again. She's just like, that's pretty cool that many people would ask you. And guess what? You don't just copy and paste. You write everyone specifically. And that's because I give a shit. If someone's writing one for me, I hope it's not canned.
Yeah, I wrote one for you, but I used ChatGPT, so I hope you don't mind.
Perfect. That's way smarter than both of us.
Dude, I just thank you for taking the time coming up here, and your amazing wife also came up here.
Yeah, she's getting her nails done right now. No kids.
We just got to find you a house in Idaho.
Yes, if anyone's listening and you're a real estate agent or a landowner, please. I'd love to be just right in the foothills, about 15 miles or so within Boise reach.
Piece of cake.
Yeah, unless you have like a lodge or something in Sun Valley, I'll take that.
Scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Right, with the lower folks on the totem.
Yeah, man, I hope you know how much of a difference you've made in my life and the way I think about things and the way I operate. And even though we don't talk every day, you know that I love you, and I'm so proud to just be associated in any way, shape, or form with you and your family and all the things you do. Thank you for what you're doing for all the veterans and all the adaptive athletes.
Likewise, brother. Thank you for having me, and right back at you, dude.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below or email podcast@mission43.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Be proud of your service, not defined by it. See you next time.